All right. Well, I am so thrilled to have David and Sarah here today. I want you to know that The Gardener was the inspiration behind this year's Storytelling Festival, which is the first weekend in February.
Many thanks.
And it's one of my favorites from childhood. But our theme is really not only gardening, but about family stories and how you pass the story along and it grows and it blossoms and you plant seeds. And your book had all of that.
Thank you
So
again.
I'm just so excited. We could just focus on your book the whole weekend, but so I had some questions I wanted to share with you, or have you answer. First of all, what's your family story related to gardening?
It's very simple, and many people have the same one. I grew up spending my summers with my grandmother in Corpus Christi, Texas, and she was an ardent gardener, not just an occasional gardener or a dabbler. And I followed her around as a little girl, as David's heard me say 10,000 times. And it must have infused me to some degree, or perhaps it's in the genes. It skipped a generation. My mother and father do not have it, but I know that they loved gardens, and her gardens, there it was for me. As I said, as a child, those are some of my first memories, so I was very young.
So, the story about your grandmother and Lydia Grace sounds a lot like you.
Thank you, but thank you for saying that. That's a compliment. This story, though, as David also knows, is the actual story of a woman I adored and was very close to for many years, a few years ago. Her name was Lydia Grace Finch, very similar to my character, of course. She transformed it into this magical place. So I wrote the book for her because as a 6-year-old child, she was put on a train by her parents who no longer could feed her during the Depression. Her father had lost his job at the local mill, and her mother, who made dresses for women, was not being asked to make anything. And she made that ride alone on a train to live with her uncle during that terrible period of distress. And the story is based on that part of her life. Her uncle.
I remember years ago when the book first came out, and I remember slides that you showed of your trip to New York to find an apartment.
Yeah.
What was that like?
By the way, I chose New York because I know New York. I don't know anything about Fort Worth, so we weren't terribly truthful about to Lydia's story. Truthful to Lydia's story about the setting, but I figured it was more important for me to know the geography and be familiar with it than to make up something. So I went back. I was looking particularly for a rooftop because in Sarah's story, the young heroine plants an extensive garden on the top of the apartment building, and that becomes a big surprise for her uncle for his birthday. And so I went back to New York and I started asking everybody we knew if I could go up on their rooftops. And all of them were a big disappointment. They weren't what I had in mind. I wasn't quite sure what I had in mind because I'd only seen rooftops from the street, but it had something to do with vents and pipes, standpipes, and that kind of busyness in the older neighborhoods in Manhattan. And finally, the last day I was there, the publicist, our friend Kate Kubert at Farrar Straus, she said, "David, you really ought to come down and take a look at my rooftop." So I went over there and we climbed the fire escape, and there was the perfect rooftop with all of these weird ventilation mechanisms. And I spent the rest of this very, very hot afternoon taking pictures, and that fire escape came to play a big part in the visual retelling of the story. And So that,
And I think that's what we're capturing with the Storytelling Festival, is that we want that connection and that reaction. We want the reality. The idea that we are bringing in storytellers from all different cultures and nationalities
Good
to
for
share
you.
their story. So how important are family stories to you?
The stories come from family or people I know really well, what the people we call, all of us here, call extended family.
Mm-hmm.
So you nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just it. My book, The Friend, which was so amazingly illustrated by this famous illustrator I sleep with.
please.
The Friend was based on a real life moment in my young life when Ola Beatrice Smith, who took care of me and care of the entire family and didn't just clean the house, but in a sense ran the house, because I had an absent father and an alcoholic mother, and my father was a very powerful man in Texas and not there very often. And Ola B raised me, and she was my family, and she saved me from drowning, as the book tells in The Friend.
Well, I know you've got so many other amazing books, and we've had several of them illustrated at the Storytelling Festival.
Thank you.
And we actually have Adam Melma
Adam, yeah.
has done several of your stories.
Yeah.
We
He's done
love him
Hoover's
very
Bride,
much.
and, we do also have a plant exhibit called Wicked Plants, the weed that killed Lincoln's mom. And so I said, well, how do you feel about doing Washington's cows? And so he's going to look into it as well.
Oh,
There's a garden.
he's just
Yeah,
extraordinary.
enjoyed it.
Well, I hope everyone will join us this February 7th and 8th, 2020 at the Kalamazoo Valley Museum for our Storytelling Festival and this year's theme, Growing Stories.